On this Sunday night from Washington, D.C., the closing arguments in a deeply polarized U.S. election.
There are those who seek to deepen division, sow hate, spread fear, and cause chaos.
Harris's plea to her supporters to get out and vote as Trump goes on the attack.
She's a radical left Marxist. They are fighting so hard to steal this damn thing.
And unprecedented security, a veteran election official on why some polling places are like fortresses. Mobilizing black voters.
So this is it here.
Why some are drifting away from the Democrats in favor of Donald Trump.
I'm very big on women's rights.
And gender divide, why Harris has an advantage among women and men are turning to Trump.
I'm voting for Trump here.
Global National with Donna Friesen, reporting tonight from Washington.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We are overlooking the Capitol building where the results of this election will be certified in January. But we're still a long way from that. First, Americans have to get through Tuesday, Election Day. And most opinion polls show Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are tied, though in some key states, Harris appears to have an advantage, and she has women on her side. We have team coverage of the U.S. presidential election tonight from Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Georgia. We begin with Jackson Proskow in Washington, D.C., and how little time is left for the candidates to make their case.
Come on, Detroit!
From Sunday services in Detroit.
And in these next 2 days, we will be tested. These days will demand everything we've got.
To a Saturday Night Live surprise.
Keep Kamala and carry on, Allah.
Kamala Harris urged voters not to get complacent, warning about Donald Trump's claims of election fraud.
I think that it is a tactic. It is meant to distract from the fact that we have and support free and fair elections in our country.
They are fighting so hard to steal this damn thing.
In Pennsylvania, an angry Trump continued to spread those very lies, saying he shouldn't have left the White House after he lost.
I shouldn't have left. I mean, honestly, because we did so well.
He fantasized about a gunman shooting the media.
To get me, somebody would have to shoot through the fake news. And I don't mind that so much.
And he complained about his standing in the polls.
A fake poll. Hey, think of it, right before the election.
Including a bombshell survey from Iowa, considered a Republican safe haven, showing Harris with a 3-point lead.
I'm not down in Iowa.
Overall, the race is still considered a toss-up.
Calling from the Kamala Harris campaign. How are you today?
Right. And so the campaigns are knocking on millions of front doors. Harris is flooding the swing states with thousands of volunteers, while Trump outsourced canvassing to Elon Musk's political organization, where Wired reports paid door knockers didn't initially know they'd be working to elect Trump and were allegedly mistreated and threatened by the company that hired them.
And Jackson Proskow is with me now. Jackson, let's talk about advance voting turnout. Millions of Americans have voted already. Can we read anything into that?
I mean, it's clear that something is happening here because 75 million Americans have already cast their ballots, and that is incredible. We're in record-breaking territory in many states here. What we know is that means there's a lot of interest and enthusiasm, which is not a surprise. We don't know, though, who people are voting for. You will see data on who's a registered Republican or Independent or Democrat, but just because they're registered with a party doesn't mean that they're voting for that party.
It's just lots of enthusiasm. And how well organized is the Get Out the Vote campaign, which is so critical?
It's incredible as well. Talk about Kamala Harris just in battleground Pennsylvania. On Saturday, the campaign says they were knocking on an average of 2,000 doors every single minute of the day. That's how well organized they are. And they also target their voters. So they know that if you have already cast a mail-in ballot, you don't need to be door knocked. They won't come to your house. They will instead focus on the people who still have to vote and make sure they get out there on Tuesday.
Just laser focused on getting those people out. Jackson Proskow, thank you. Well, a big motivator in this election, especially among female voters, is reproductive rights. A 2022 Supreme Court ruling took away the constitutional right to an abortion, and Kamala Harris has made that a plank in her election campaign. Neetu Garcha is in Baltimore, Maryland tonight. Neetu, you've been speaking with voters who are directly affected by this. What are they saying?
That's right, Donna. Voters have told us they feel the stakes couldn't be higher, and they're becoming increasingly aware of how their choices will shape the future of reproductive health care in this country. Contemplating her choice, 28-year-old Taylor DeVille, who grew up Catholic, is unapologetic.
I am so grateful that I had my abortion. I'm happier than I've ever been. And that's because of the choice I made in 2017.
The Baltimore resident points to the disproportionate impact of abortion restrictions on marginalized groups, especially low-income women.
I was making $20,000 a year when I got pregnant. I had 2 jobs. I had just graduated college. There was no way I was going to be able to support a child.
You know, my grandma was a very young mother, my mom was a very young mother, and none of them got to finish college because of it.
Unlike her mother and grandmother, Jakia Johnson completed college as a young mother. Johnson is encouraging people to vote yes on Maryland's ballot measure.
So a yes vote means that you support amending the Declaration of Rights in the Maryland Constitution.
A constitutional amendment to protect abortion rights, which are already legal here but would cement the freedoms in the state.
Do you believe in punishment for abortion? There has to be some form of punishment.
In the wake of the 2022 decision in Texas to overturn Roe v. Wade, the case which legalized abortion nationwide, advocates have pointed to a maternal mortality crisis in the U.S. with cases of delayed emergency medical care, like a 28-year-old mother who died from sepsis in Texas due to extreme abortion policies.
A lot of these stories are being used and manipulated.
Pro-life advocate Christine Flowers believes doctors in states like Texas with heavier restrictions on abortions need to be held accountable.
A lot of the people who have been harmed in Texas and in some of the other states, they suffered medical malpractice. They were not suffering because of an abortion ban, because there are no bans when it comes to saving the life of a mother.
Beulah Osweke's organization is focusing on addressing voter apathy.
Oftentimes a lot of energy and resources. What do you care about? What do you want? When elections roll around and then people disappear.
Back in Baltimore for DeVille, a former journalist turned city investigator.
It meant a chance to pursue a career I love.
Who received a flood of supportive letters after she published an essay about her abortion.
As long as women are denied the rights to our own bodies, none of us should stop talking about this.
She says the response emphasized how her story is more common than many think, and why this issue and women voters could be what determined this election. Now, most people that we have talked to are steering clear of making any kind of prediction about which way they think this will go. But one thing is for sure, the women who've come forward to share their personal stories about the restrictions on reproductive rights have become a political force. Donna?
Neetu Garcha in Baltimore, Maryland, thanks. The most basic civic right, the right to vote, is being protected by panic buttons and bulletproof glass. Arizona's Secretary of State in charge of certifying statewide results has said he wears a bulletproof vest. It is a far-reaching effect of Donald Trump's refusal to accept his loss in 2020. A little earlier today, I spoke with the head of the National Association of Election Officials, Tammy Patrick. Tammy Patrick, thanks for joining us. You're recognized as a leader and an expert in election administration, and I know this is not your first rodeo. How does this election compare in terms of threats and the need for security to others?
Well, thank you for having me. And it's true, I've been doing this for a couple of decades now. And unfortunately, this is an election like I've never seen. We have had our professionals double down on training, on preparations for what could potentially happen in this moment. And so what I'm hearing from our colleagues all across the United States is that they are prepared for the worst and hoping for the best.
Well, that's a good position to be in, but tell me a bit about the threats. Are individual election workers being targeted?
They absolutely are. Some of them are just being targeted very, very personally. For instance, they're following their children to school as they walk to school at the local elementary school. They're harassing their aged parents. They're targeting them very, very specifically and very purposefully. What's the most disconcerting about it, though, is that this is a concerted, coordinated campaign, as it were, across the country. And it's sowing chaos in some ways, but because election officials have unfortunately been dealing with this for the last couple of years, we now, I think, have a much better way of understanding what they need to do to try and bring down the rhetoric, to try and de-escalate the situation, and make sure that if there is someone who's going to act on the threats that they're making to our election officials, that we are prepared with partnerships with local, state, and federal law enforcement, and make ssure that justice will be served and that it will be served swiftly.
But where are these threats coming from? I mean, targeting people individually like that sounds quite scary, frankly. Are they also coming in social media posts? Are they coming by email? And who is behind it?
It's unfortunate to say this, but it's coming from all over the place. Individuals are getting it on their personal cell phone. They're getting it at work. They're getting it via emails. They're getting it on social media. They're also getting it in person. People coming into their offices and threatening them in person, or at the grocery store, or the place where they worship. I had one local election official tell me that she used to be seen as the pillar in her community, and now she's seen as the pariah.
Tammy, did you imagine that we would ever be having this kind of discussion in the prelude to a U.S. presidential election?
I never thought we would be in this place. And I will say, I was a local election official in Maricopa County, Arizona. There's barbed wire fence. There's multiple gates that you have to go through before you ever make it to the front door. There's bulletproof vest or bulletproof glass in the lobby. So my former colleagues are sitting behind this fortress that's almost like a prison. It's really troubling that we're in a place in our nation's history where a portion of our communities do not trust those who are serving them. And that is something I never thought I would see in the United States of America.
Tammy Patrick, thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you for having me.
On Tuesday, we will have live coverage of America Votes, a Canadian perspective on this historic election. We will be streaming live beginning at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, wherever you watch Global News, including BC One, globalnews.ca, YouTube, the Global TV app, Pluto TV, and Prime. That is it from Washington for now. Sophie Louie is in the Global National Newsroom and has the rest of the day's news. Sophie.
All right, thanks, Donna. Coming up, a violent protest at a Hindu temple in Ontario. Plus, the port labor disputes on both sides of the country and what they could mean for the upcoming holiday season. In Brampton, Ontario, Peel Regional Police are calling for calm and say they are aware of a violent protest that erupted at a Hindu temple today. Video circulating online shows a scuffle with those involved waving Khalistani flags and some using flag poles to strike others inside the grounds of the Hindu temple. On social media, Transport Minister Anita Anand called the incident unacceptable and said all religions, Hindus included, have the right to attend places of worship and practice their religion without such assaults. Well, the clock is ticking down to a port labor disruption that could have ripple effects right across the country. On the west coast, BC's ports could see job action beginning tomorrow morning. In Montreal, dock workers have been striking since Thursday. Nathaniel Dove reports on the key issues and what's at stake for Canadians.
Cargo is still moving for now. But BC's port, vital to Canada's economy, is facing another shutdown.
This is 10% of the Canadian economy per month passes through the Port of Vancouver. And it's not the type of thing that it's an on-off switch.
The BC Maritime Employers Association and Dock Foreman Local 514 couldn't agree after 2 years of talks. The employers even published their offer, which raises the median salary up to more than $290,000, they say. But experts tell Global News money isn't the issue, it's automation.
The workers and their union are reasoning that it is not much use to have a generous six-figure salary if they don't have a job in a few years.
They could join striking Montreal dock workers, pushing for better conditions, partially shutting down that port.
If you're not bringing goods into the market, then you are creating yet another supply chain issue for this country.
Experts warn long job actions at two main ports could raise prices. But disruption is the point, and both sides are responsible. On Sunday, the union didn't respond. The employers say they had no update. Global News contacted the federal labor minister's office. Stephen McKinnon's staff directed us to a statement where he said federal mediators are on site. Both sides' deadlines for a deal expire at 8 a.m. Pacific Monday. Nathaniel Dove, Global News, Toronto.
Ahead, 2 days from the election, why Democrats are concerned about losing black voters. Well, Kamala Harris could make history as America's first female president and its second black president. But her path to victory appears to be running into an unexpected roadblock. According to opinion polls, some black voters are drifting away from the Democrats. Our Jeff Semple reports from the southern swing state of Georgia.
Door knocking in the deep south.
Ma'am, may I ask you something? Have you voted yet?
In southern Georgia, Reverend Ezekiel Hawley is getting out the vote, a right the 83-year-old never takes for granted.
It's very important, very important.
So this is it here. His office is lined with newspaper clippings from the early 60s, when white supremacists burned down churches here, where activists were registering black voters.
Dr. King and the nonviolent movement changed the world. We're not going back, we're going forward.
Today, a third of Georgia's registered voters are black, more than any other swing state. 4 years ago, black Georgians turned out in large numbers for Joe Biden, flipping the traditionally Republican state. The vast majority of black voters are now expected to vote for Kamala Harris to become the first female and second black president.
I'm very, very hopeful. I love the energy. Women are on fire.
But for weeks now, opinion polls have shown that a small but significant number of black voters, and men in particular, who supported Biden back in 2020, plan to cast their ballot this time for Donald Trump.
That includes Daryl Allen, who says life was better under Trump.
Economy, border security, and just taking care of our people, putting America first.
The U.S. economy is growing faster than most, but many communities here in southern Georgia wouldn't know it.
The pockets are lighter than they were 4 years ago.
In Vivian Child's home of Bibb County, a quarter of residents live below the poverty line. The 72-year-old already voted for Trump, prompting criticism from other black voters who cite his controversial comments about racial minorities.
They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
When you hear some of the comments that he's made, how does that sit with you?
I'm going to be always honest. I don't necessarily agree with everything he said. I've been married to my husband for 52 years. We do not always agree. I don't love him any less.
Do you think Donald Trump is racist?
Absolutely not. Racism was when I would go to a restroom and there would be several stalls. One of those was for me, and it would say colored.
Y'all gonna have a ban on the ground Tuesday.
Hawley shares those memories, but he's voting for Harris.
She is capable of leading the country, even though some of the maybe young men have a problem with the leadership of a woman.
He worries sexism is at play and shudders to think that Georgia, the cradle of the civil rights movement, could now cast a deciding vote against a black presidential candidate. Jeff Semple, Global News, Dawson, Georgia.
While polls show Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are virtually tied, the makeup of their support is strikingly different. As Mike Armstrong reports, the gender divide between the two candidates has some calling Tuesday's election a battle of the sexes.
It's a brisk weekend morning at the farmers market in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Locals have been selling their wares here for close to 300 years. In all that time, there's never been an election quite like this.
I'm very big on women's rights and how women are treated in general.
I'm very focused on women's rights and the rights for choosing for abortion. Okay.
Now, as many vegetables as you can find at this market, you can probably find as many issues in this election. But more than any other, the overturning of Roe versus Wade has taken a gender divide that already existed in U.S. politics and made it even bigger. Support for the two candidates is almost a mirror image, the same except in reverse. Harris leads with women at 55%, and Trump leads with men at 54%.
This is an election with probably the greatest gender divide we've ever seen.
He would ban abortion nationwide.
Now, having women in her corner does give Harris an advantage. Going all the way back to 1980, a higher percentage of women has voted compared to men in every presidential election. That doesn't appear to be changing this time around.
Early votes are very heavily tilted towards women. And if that continues, that's very positive for Harris.
Now, with young women, the gender gap is more of a gender canyon. Harris has a massive 33-point advantage.
I'm voting for Trump here.
Young men are strikingly different. It's a group that would usually be comfortably in the Democratic column. Instead, Trump and Harris are basically neck and neck.
Women have to be protected when they're at home.
Trump is pushed to sort of hyper-masculinity that has helped with some men, but turned off some women.
Well, Trump thinks that he has to take care of us. He's going to take care of all women. I see how he's taken care of them in the past, so...
Now, just building an advantage with a specific demographic isn't enough. A positive poll with any group doesn't mean much if it doesn't turn out at the voting booth. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
And that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Sophie Louie. As we inch closer to America's Decision Day, tonight's Your Canada is the Canadian Embassy in Washington, D.C., designed by the famed Canadian architect Arthur Erickson. Thanks for watching. Donna will be back with you tomorrow from Washington. Have a great evening.